All right, what's the factored form of these? So since this has a leading coefficient of 1, that's going to simplify this a little bit for us in the sense of we will have two binomials each with W in front. That's how we're going to start it. Okay. Now, this number, this positive 77 at the end, comes from multiplying this second term and this second term together. How do we get a positive number? Well, we must have either multiplied a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So we look here to see what they will both be. If we know they're both the same, they'll both be positive because that W term has a positive. So we're going to separate them with a plus. Okay. Now we need to figure out what two numbers multiply together to be 77 and add together to be 18. So how are we going to do that? Well, we can list out all the factors, and we know that we're going to be adding two positives. So it's going to be 77 breaks down to be 1 times 77, or 2 times nothing. So we don't have to check any multiples of 2. If it doesn't work for 2, it won't work for any even numbers. 3 times anything? No, they don't. 7 and 7 don't add up to a multiple of 3. 7 and 7 is 14. That's not a multiple of 3. 5 times anything? Nope, doesn't end in 0, 5. 7 times anything? Sure. 7 times 11. And in fact, look what happens when we do that. 7 plus 11 is the 18 that we need there. So our two numbers are 7 and 11. So we write W plus 7, W plus 11. That's our answer. Where do we see that? We see that in choice C. Okay, let's continue doing that. Because we have, again, a leading coefficient of 1 here, just going to break down into D and D, D times D. Sorry about that. Like that. And then we are going to look here and say, what is this number? It is a positive 63. How did we multiply these two spaces together, these two terms here, to get a positive number? It must have either been a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So this then tells us what they both are. They're both pluses. So we're going to have D plus and D plus inside of these two binomials. Just getting that out of there to clean it up. Now, we take our number at the end, 63, and we say, let's break 63 down. How does 63 break down? Into two numbers that will add together to be 16. Because that's the middle term, 16D. So 63, we've got 1 times 63, that adds to 64, no good. 2 times anything? No. 3 times anything? Yep, 3 times 21, that adds to 24, not 16 though. 5 times anything? Remember, we don't have to check multiples of 2 if it doesn't work for 2, so no even numbers need to be checked. And that's the case with anything. Like if it doesn't work for 8, it won't work for multiples of 8, etc. Okay, so 5, does it work for 5? No, doesn't work for 5. Um, does it work for 7? Yeah, 7 times 9 is 63. And notice that we've essentially met in the middle. This value is coming up. This number is coming down. The only number inside to check in between them is 8. And 8, this is not a perfect multiple of 8. So we've checked all the numbers. We've got all the combinations. And in fact, we can see which combination is going to work. These two numbers will add together to be 16. And so we've got D plus 7 and D plus 9. And where do we see that? D plus 7, D plus 9. Done. Yep, and I'm going to just clean this up a little bit. And I'm going to show you a trick just to eliminate answers at the start. Cleaning these things up. So let's look at this. this is going to be a good little exercise to say, let's eliminate some answers straight away. Okay, this number is positive. How do you get a positive number there? Well, you must have multiplied two things of the same sign, either two positives or two negatives. Give us that. So any answer that has one of each is going to be automatically disqualified. These two will be automatically disqualified because, as you can see, let me erase those marks again for a second. As you can see, if we multiplied together negative 10 times positive 9, that would give us a negative 90, not the positive 90 that they showed with us. Same thing here. Positive 10 times negative 9 would be negative 90. And that's not what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with negative 90, dealing with positive 90. So we can eliminate those as choices right away. That's a good trick for if you somehow don't exactly know what the right answer is, but you can eliminate ones that you definitely know are wrong. Then that, makes it better for you to choose your best guess from the remaining answers. But hopefully you know how to do it and you don't need to guess. So we know they're both the same sign because that number is positive. And then the question is, what are they both? And so we will look to the middle term for it to tell us. They are both negative. Okay? So of the choices left, that's the only one that can be is B, right? So we're going to go with that. But I'll help you factor it in a second just to know what you're doing and check it. Yeah, so you're not really guessing here. And by the way, I just want to point this out. This is worth mentioning. Notice how you have a positive here and a negative here. There's one of each sign. That does not mean there's one of each sign in your factored binomials. Okay, there is not one of each sign. There's both negatives. So don't go with that. Don't see, oh, I see a positive here and a negative here. We must have one of each. That is a classic mistake that people make when they don't understand what they're doing. Okay, this B is our answer because they're both negative. And if you factored it out, you could list your factors of 90 out and say, I know it's two negative numbers, so it's going to be like negative 1 times negative 90, etc. Okay, but hopefully you'll be able to notice, oh, 90 can come from negative 9 times negative 10. And those two add together to be negative 19, this middle term. And you don't have to list all factors of something. You just need to come up with the right pair. So if you can come up with the right pair without listing them all, then great. Don't bother listing them all. So anyway, because we know that they were both negative here, we can eliminate this as a choice, and that leaves B. We have one more slide to do. And when we're doing this, we're going to do the same thing. We have a leading coefficient of 1. So this will break down into x times x plus or minus something times x plus or minus something. Now, how do we determine it? Well, we look to this sign of the constant. The sign of the constant is negative. How would we multiply two numbers together and get a negative? We must have one of each sign. Okay? So remember, these both say negative. That doesn't mean that your answer has two negatives, because this last sign being negative means there was one of each. Okay, and then this doesn't help you determine because there's one of each, so this isn't going to tell you what they both are because they're not both the same thing. So we know that we have one of each, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to eliminate answers we know are wrong. That has the same sign twice, that has the same sign twice, it's not going to be that. Okay, so then we say, what factors of 42, negative 42, will lead us to the right answer? So let's write negative 42 out here. Say we could do 1 times negative 42 or negative 1 times positive 42. List them like that. Well, you know that because this is a negative 1 right there. Let me do it in a different color. Because this is a negative 1 right here, we need two numbers that are just separated by 1. And so you can see their choices. They give us 6 and 7. We can list them all right now, but we don't need to. I'm going to list out, it's either 6 times negative 7 or negative 6 times positive 7. And then the question is, which two add together to be negative 1? And the two that add together to be -1 is the one where the negative number is bigger than the positive number, and that's -7 and +6. So up here on top, we've got one sign of each. The positive is with the 6, and the negative is with the 7. And that answer then is answer A, right there. Okay? Okay, so let me get this stuff out of here, and we'll do number 40. Um, Again, we're going to look at the final constant value, and we're going to see what the signs need to be. Okay, so we look here, we say this is positive, so we're going to have the same sign twice, and then when we know that it's the same sign twice, we can find out what that sign is from that. So we've got D minus, and D minus, and then we just got to figure out what are we subtracting. Notice that since they're going to be the same sign, if we were to FOIL, we get some negative number of D's inside and some negative number of D's outside, and they will add together since they're the same sign rather than canceling out and subtracting. So we're going to look at two numbers that multiply together to be 45 and add together to 14. Or really, actually, what I'll do is I'll list this out as, like, for 45, since I know they're both negative, I'll do -1 times -45. Those add up to -46, not what we want. Okay. Let's keep going. 2 times anything? No. 3 times anything? Yes. -3 times -15. Those add up to -18, though. -5 times anything? Yep. -5 times -9. And blammo. That's what we got. That's what we want because they add up to -14 and they multiply to 45. So we've got D minus 5, D minus 9. And I'm going to advise you here on these problems. Don't look at the answers and multiply them together and see which one turns into it. Because if you weren't provided with the answers and you were told just factor these, you need to know how to factor them by going from the trinomial to the two binomials and not always starting with the binomials. You're not, like, there'll be plenty of situations where you're not given the possible answers. And so you need to know how to go backwards and factor it without being offered choices right at the start. Now you can see these all have 9 and 5, so that makes it really easy for you to figure out that it's going to be 9 and 5 that you're going to have at the ends there. And really the trick with these is determining what's the sign. Okay. So I can do the next one that way, and you can just determine what the sign is. By the way, this one is D. Okay, and the quick rule here is watch, check it out. Since for all of these, we've got 6 and 8, 6 and 8, 6 and 8, 6 and 8. Okay. You can say, okay, well, we know it's going to break down like that. If I'm looking for my choices, I have to look at this number here, this constant term, and say, oh, that's a negative number. It must have been a positive times a negative. So the first thing that you can do is straight away eliminate anything that doesn't have one of each sign. And then you say, okay, when I combine them, I need to get a positive number. So if I combine these two, I'd get a +6, and these two would be a -8, and that would give me a -2D there. Can't be that, so we need the positive number to be bigger. So C is the positive number. I'm sorry, C is the answer because it's got 8 is the positive number, and that's more than the -6. So if you put that together, that works out to be what we were given. But you should know how to properly factor this and not just choose from the answers, because the answers kind of give it away to a certain extent. So know how to factor.